Welcome to our channel. On this episode, we focused on the digital asset known as XRP. We gather videos and information from the web, and if you stick around, we are going to share it with you. So stay tuned for news and updates.
Law, the word deposit is meaningless. What the bank is doing is very different from what it presents. If you give your money to a bank, even though it's called a deposit, simply a loan to the bank.
That's true.
Banks borrow from the public. What about lending? Surely they're lending money. No, they don't. Banks don't lend money. They're in the business of purchasing securities. Here's the loan contract, here's the offer letter, and you sign. At law, it's very clear, you have issued a promissory note, and the bank is going to purchase that. How does this fit together? 97% of bank deposits are created out of nothing by banks when they lend. That can be actually positive for the economy as long as this money creation is in line with the creation of new goods and services, implementation of new technologies, business investment, productive loans. You will have no inflation.
As opposed to speculation and asset price.
As opposed to, there's two other types. If banks create credit for, banks are being thought of as intermediaries, but this is not really what's happening. Banks,
what are they then?
They're creators of the money supply.
Simply flooded the system with money.
Yes, we did.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally. As a central bank, we have the ability to create money.
Yes, well, I produced the first empirical studies to prove that. Banks are thought of as deposit-taking institutions that lend money. The legal reality is banks don't take deposits and banks don't lend money. What's less well understood is money creation for financial transactions, for purchasing ownership rights.
Can you characterize everything that the Fed has done as essentially flooding the system with money?
Yes, exactly.
And there's no end to your ability to do that?
There is no end to our ability to do that.
You're giving somebody new purchasing power over existing assets, and therefore you must push up asset prices. That also creates the inequality. Bank credit is extended for productive purposes, you're fine, you get a good economy, no inflation, and financial stability. It doesn't mean financial transactions are bad. No, let the speculators speculate and let them even borrow money, but not from banks.
Affect relationships are by and large timeless. There is evolution. Evolution is how something changes over a period of time. And then around those things are these cycles, because if they're put in the same position, let's say a Federal Reserve is put into a position of having to decide, do you have defaults or do you print money? There's a choice, and that choice repeats over history. And so you can see what are the indicators of that position and what are the reactions and what are the choices. So the cause-effect relationships, by and large, remain the same through history. But there's always a reason. We're changing the world order, okay? In 1945, we started the New World Order. What I mean is, throughout history, there's a fight for control, because there's no world court that you go to and plead your case. And so there's a fight for power. So there's a war, and then the winners come out of that war, and the winners set the rules. And so, 1945, the United States had 80% of the world's money. Gold was money at the time. It had half the world's GDP. It had a monopoly on military power. So, the U.S. set the world order. That's why the United Nations is in New York. Washington, D.C. has the IMF and the World Bank. And its currency became the reserve currency because of that set of circumstances. Things evolve. Things change over history. So the three big things that are changing now, that haven't occurred in our lifetime, is the amount of debt and money creation, which affects the value of money, and you could see it affecting what's going on every day. The large debt puts central bankers in a choice. Do you pay it back with hard money, or do you pay it back with printed devalued money? And if you pay it back with hard money, it's hard. In other words, that's when you have debt crises. So in all cases, they eventually print money, and that produces inflation. That's the place we are at this moment. Okay. The second is when there's a great internal conflict, usually when there's a large wealth and values gap, at the same time as you have a financial problem. Then you get populism of the left and populism of the right. In other words, those who feel disenfranchised want people who are going to fight for them. They don't want compromisers. They don't want them to be in the middle, because middle means that they're not fighting for them. They want them to have guts. So you have populists of the left, and their positions harden, and there are no compromises. That's why we're potentially in a situation that you could see in one of these elections, maybe in 2024, that neither side would accept losing. Perhaps we see that. Maybe you don't follow the rulings of the Supreme Court. Anyway, these things have not happened in our lifetime, but they happened many times in history. So if you look at that, you see from those patterns why the gaps become greater and the positions harden, and you see the dynamic. So that's the second. And the third is the rise of a great power to challenge the existing great power. In other words, I gave you the example of how the United States was so dominant in 1945. Now it's not as dominant. It is not dominant. In other words, China and the opposition is as strong as the United States and its allies. And so we have a conflict. And there are 5 kinds of wars. And they start in this order, just sequentially, typically. A trade war, a technology war, a geopolitical influence war. Then you get into a capital and economic warfare, which we are now with sanctions. They always happened in history. And then there's a military war. And so you could see that.
This is not financial advice, and by any means you should not take any advice from us. We have no financial background. This channel is strictly fun base. So stay along for the ride, and if you like what you see, be free to like and subscribe.